people ask me, why do I do this? Because this is what this is this is what I do. I've accepted my path all those years ago, and this is what I do. One has led on to the other, to the other, to the other, to experience this and understand this great unfolding picture in front of me. Is it right? I'll know whenever I get to the end, and we'll see.
Where do you think this great unfolding is going to? What does your intuition tell you?
Well, I suppose whenever it comes time for me to give out that last breath, I'll certainly find out. Okay, does this part go that way? Do I go that way? We'll see.
Well, hello, I'm here with Barry Fitzgerald. And Barry, I've been listening to a lot of Barry Fitzgerald's interviews down throughout the years. He's a great guy, and he's an Irish author, appeared in numerous documentaries and articles, and I'm very happy to be able to speak to him tonight. Barry, I heard you mentioning in an interview once about iron and how significant iron is to the Celts, and it offers spiritual protection in certain situations. Could you maybe elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think to use the term the Celts would be short-sighted. It goes beyond the Celts, but the use of iron in itself was seen for its magical purposes as far back as even within Egyptian time, within 33,000 BC or 3300 BC. But in particular, in regards to the likes of the Middle East, they were using iron taken from meteorites, much like this one that fell in Russia in 1947. But for them, it was seen as this gift from the heavens that was bestowed to them. It fell to the ground, and even King Tut's dagger was made from meteoritic iron back in 1300 and odd BC. So we see that process developing and really creating momentum. We also see that also developing within the Himalayan region, around 1000 BC. And the use of certainly the gods were known for using these iron weapons, these sacred iron weapons. Now, in regards to Ireland in its stance, we started seeing this migration of people coming across from the Middle East, and in fact, around 3200 BC, we have this particular character dated from the North Antrim coast, and she came from the Middle East as well. So we know that particular culture was moving back and forward within Ireland at that particular time, carrying with it those customs that went with that. And in fact, those early people were also the people that were putting their hands on the early passage chambers and everything else that we have dotted around the island. Now, the Iron Age itself wasn't really arriving in Ireland until, at least the Celts anyway, they weren't arriving in Ireland until from around 500 BC, and it wasn't a total takeover. It was something that migrated in, and that Iron Age itself lasted from around that particular period, 500 BC, until around 400 AD. So Christianity had certainly moved in there by the later stages there, and iron smelting was already well in progress. So we can see that move from the meteoritic iron, the sacredness, and how that would bestow safety and also something which, of course, was very highly valued by the Egyptian royalty, and in itself, that was prized more than gold itself. So the value of it was very worthy because, of course, it was something that came from the heavens. It was bestowed. It obviously had its associations with it. But that's the cultural aspect to it. That's the historical footprint that we're able to see in a nutshell. But in practice, I see the value of iron, and I've been involved with researching the paranormal now for, it's rolling on 35 years now. And the last book that I released, the Deceptions of Gods and Men, last March, I really wanted to drive home this aspect of a lot of the phenomena that we were looking at seem to be coming from the same source. And this idea of masks being applied, and how we identify them and how these things wish to be identified, served to blind us somewhat of the historical context to this energy that was coming through.
What do you mean? What do you mean by masks?
Masks, as in, well, if I go through, say, the modern aspect, the last, say, 1,000 years, if we look at the ancient gods, and we've got a trait of common factors, that if we take those particular traits and move them across to the likes of the jinn from the Middle East, we find those are the same, but the mask is different. And the way that we interpret that is very, very different. But the way the phenomenon interacts with us remains the same.
In what sense?
In the sense of the likes of their pluses and their minuses, their weaknesses and their strengths, and when we look at the likes of iron, for instance, with those particular old gods, we move that across into the jinn, we move that across into the daemon, we move that across into the earth spirit realm, fairy, call it what you want, and you also move that into the modern age, in which we're looking at this whole arena now, which has become the mainstream being driven to us, which is the UFOs and everything else. There's also a weakness there within this particular phenomena, and we can trace that weakness back through that age of time, irrelevant of the masks in which it appears as. We see the phenomena in which it interacts remains the same, and also its weaknesses. So that was very, very interesting to see. But from the especially a lot of the research that I did, I put my own neck on the line. I need to see how the phenomenon interacts. What way does it interact? And watching everything and experiencing what's happening. And then I can see these particular weaknesses, and look for those particular aspects that can be utilized for us to keep us safe enough during these particular episodes. And iron was a key factor within that, and it kept showing up time and time again, was iron, iron, iron. And even this particular aspect of the old Semitic incubus and succubus, those particular old demons, 9 times out of 10 they attacked women more than men, but they waited until the woman entered her monthly cycle. She became anemic. That's when the door was opened and the attack began. So it was interesting to see that, and also from a cultural aspect, you know, from the whole aspect of the fairies here on the island, and the old mythology and the folklore that surrounds that. We see the same phenomena being applied to the fairies, for instance, as we do with the modern day alien tech. For instance, in Leitrim, there was a farm there in which, at the turn of the 20th century, the farmer had the cows in a small barn on the side of the cottage. The mother had given birth, the cow, and the young calf and the mother were put into the barn to keep them safe. But when he woke the next morning, he went out, and both the mother and the calf showed signs which are identical, what we'd identify today as mutilation phenomena. And the organs were removed and everything else, and both animals were dead. His only regret is that he didn't put an iron horseshoe above the door. Again, these old customs were something that we were seeing and being handed down from generation to generation to generation because of the success of the iron when dealing with this particular type of phenomena. And it's interesting, again, that was another common factor on where they interact, was this aspect of the mutilation, which also seemed to pull its way through the ages. But we just interpreted it differently as time went on.
Are mutilations still going on in Ireland?
Oh my God, yes, absolutely. Yes. In fact, I came across a calf myself, and I was actually investigating. It was a ring fort that was associated with fairy phenomena, and the cow was lying over the ditch in the next field, and the mutilation signs were all there, and the sexual organs were gone. The anus was ringed or bored out, and parts of the mouth were missing, and the eyes and everything else.
Why don't we hear about this? Why don't we ever hear about this in the media?
There's a fantastic book that was written by a couple of guys down in Dublin, and they covered a particular farm up in Derry, London Derry, and that particular farm itself, when I was speaking to them and I showed them the photograph that I had, and I said, look, is this, would you agree that this is mutilation? And they said, yes, absolutely. And at that particular time I had said to them, but I didn't think there was any mutilation now going on in Ireland. And they said, Barry, in the investigation we're doing, with 500 mutilations that has happened. And I thought at the time, whenever I was talking to him on the telephone, I thought, wow, 500 mutilations for an island. You know, I don't like to brag about it, but you know, that's quite a statement to make for such a small island. And he said, no, Barry, that's one farm.
That's crazy.
And this particular farmer took this problem to the local police force. The police force handed it off to the vets and the RSPCA, who they handed it off, and he ended up going to Stormont in Belfast for help. They handed it off and moved him to London. London moved him to Brussels, and Brussels said that, yes, we will look at this. They took all the details of everything that was happening, and within such a short period of time, they handed it back to the local police and said, we're not dealing with this. It came back to the police, and the police came to him, and they said, the animals that are in your care are under your farm. If we hear tell of any more animals, in other words, shut your mouth. If we hear tell of any other animals that have been killed in this way on this farm, you will lose all your subsidies. So he was being, like all farmers, you know, during that particular time, they were being paid quite a nice thing to help the farming move, roll over a profit. It mightn't be big, but it was enough of a profit. And when you get threatened with that, you have the potential of losing your own home and everything that you held sacred. So you're going to keep quiet. And that was something that was very apparent within the book that the guys had written. And unfortunately, the farmer did do that. He stepped back and said nothing more. It's still continuing. How on earth he's able to cope with that, I do not know. But there are other farms that is happening in, both around the vicinity of that farm, but also in other parts of Ireland.
What's causing these mutilations? What's
Well,
how are they happening?
whenever we started to look into it, there seemed to be something. It was suggestive that there was a problem with the immune system, that whatever these things were doing, they were targeting that. The animals were being forced into a state of fear, and their mucosa was going into overdrive. And that's what they seem to be harvesting, was this element from all the different entry points within the body. And they were pulling from that. Now, again, we see this phenomenon not only happening in Ireland, but we also see it happening across the United States. We see it happening in India, in Russia. It's a global thing, and it has been happening for a very, very long time. I do know of tales in the Himalayas in which Indian farmers there would say when they see the lights coming off the mountain, they know to get the animals in. Otherwise, these things will kill the animals. And again, this has been going on for hundreds of thousands of years. But again, it's just the way we interpret it. It's tricky.
So are you assuming that the way we interpret it is through the UFO phenomenon? Is that the current mask
Yeah,
that it's wearing?
that would be the current mask. Is we're thinking that this is something that's coming from Mars or Jupiter or some other galaxy, but I doubt that.
So you think it's more spiritual than physical?
There is an element to it that does have connotations of spirituality to it, but spirituality and soul experience of spirituality, I say, is two different things. And I think within the modern state of things, we find that very interchangeable. And looking back at some of our ancient texts and things like that, they see them as being separate. So in that particular perspective, are we looking, I'll just put this forward, just a hypothesis, are we looking at our own Trinity? Within us, you have body, soul, and spirit. So from that particular perspective, we do end up looking in another direction, and following aspects of the soul, and that takes us down a very, very different rabbit hole altogether.
So Barry, when you say the soul and the spirit, they're two different things. What exactly do you mean by that? Because I've always equated them with the same thing, really.
The soul itself, from what I can make out in the research I've been doing in this, is that the soul's responsibility was to make sure that the Trinity stayed safe. The body survived as long as possible. All the seat of our psychic abilities comes from the soul, and the soul will also muster our needs, wants, its base root instincts, sexual desires and deviances, will all emanate from this particular animalistic version of us. Again, that gets complicated, but for now, we'll just leave it at that. Whereas the spirit, the spirit is here. It's very experiential, and a totally different kettle of fish altogether. But yeah, separately two different things. But the return, when the soul returns, we go back and we start looking at the ancient customs, Nordic customs across from the Fertile Crescent and Syria and places like that. We get those customs traveling across Europe. They traveled east to west. They followed the sun. And in particular, we find aspects of that soul recognition within the mound builders, the ancient mound builders. Now, the mound builders we can push back. We can track them back through the historical record till around 6000 BC. After that, we're lost. We don't have any written context of that after that. But where you've got the Eubidians in northern Iraq, that is where it finally ends in our historical sleuth investigation, if you like, to go back into time. That's where we can get to, and within the mounds there, we find these statues of creatures which I can only describe as they're like a mixture of dogmen and reptilians. Yet one of the reptilians is breastfeeding, so that goes against what we tend to know of what a reptile does. Never mind the fact that they're bipedal. But the archaeologists have identified that these statues are they're not dolls, they're not toys. They're a representation of something, and it was connected with the mounds. So when we move forward and come into Northern Europe, we see this track of the mound builders making their way through Western Europe, and especially up into the Nordic countries. That's where we see this crisscross of the death cult and the Nordic death cult, ancestral worship, and also this aspect of the serpent worship, which is ingrained with sun worship. But with these mounds, the ancients, they would have brought the deceased to the mound. By that stage, the spirit was gone, but what lingered was the soul. And it could linger from 2 days to 2 weeks, but it was brought to the mound, and the mound tended to be in these remote areas. And sometimes there were islands, and the body was left on the island. And when, according to the Nordic death cults, when the soul broke free, it went through a state of metempsychosis. It changed its appearance, and altered and changed into a serpent, and then progressed its way back into this mound. And that in itself was the doorway to this other place, the void, if you like. And from the ancient culture there down in the Fertile Crescent, we have stone reliefs of these ancient geniuses, these gods standing with human bodies and wings and the head of, say an eagle. But there are two things which are unique in these particular portrayals. One is a particular cone that the god is holding. I call it a god. It's not a god. It's a semi-god, and it's holding this cone, presenting it to the kings or the priests who are there in attendance, and also carrying a bag. And this ancient bag, we call it the handbag. That in itself has been seen all the way back into depictions of that have been seen in Göbekli Tepe, in southern Turkey, which has been dated to around 9,500, between 9,500 and 14,000 BCE, this ancient temple. So you've got the carvings of these ancient bags. Well, what the hell are the bags? It's whenever we go to Sardinia, we find the remnants of this once huge mound, which was orientated to the sun. Again, you've got the sun, you've got the connection with the stone, and on the opening of the remains of this huge mound is this massive handbag with an entrance in it. And that in itself is nothing more than a receptacle. It's an icon for the receptacle of the soul. And each hand, both hands that carry the objects, also have solar discs on their wrists. So both are connected with the sun. I'll not go further down that route. I'm probably boring you at this stage.
Nothing could be further from the truth. Is this what the Druids believed in?
Not quite, because that particular information, the information that we have from the Middle East, from the people who were building those particular chambers, came across the west of Ireland, got to here, but there was a problem because there was an influx of people from the Black Sea around 2000 BC. And there is some DNA work that is being done, and it's highly controversial because it's seemingly suggests is that those people that came across completely wiped out the male lineage of the people that built those particular passage chambers. So it was a huge eradication.
Why?
And by the time you've got the Celts, the Druids moving in to Ireland, this is thousands of years later, they're inheriting something which there's no paperwork for. We're looking at a culture that was verbal, and when you slice the head of that particular historical connotations, there is nothing to back that up. It's lost, it's gone forever. So now we're starting to filter through, and I've been working for a long time looking at the history and analyzing it and experiencing these things myself in these particular locations, and breaking it down to understand what these things were, what they were connected to.
Can you give me an example of when you experienced it yourself, like for?
Yeah, many times. Being at the entranceway to the void, I ended up at an island we call the Island of the Dead, and it's in Donegal. Little did we know, we had no idea that that's what it was going to turn out to be. Whenever we finally discovered the Nordic aspect to the mounds and the cult of the dead. But the experience there that I had, I was able to experience the serpents at the mouth of this passage chamber and the remnants of a passage chamber. Now I gotta say, Michael, this was one of the most frightening experiences that I've ever had in my entire life. In fact, it was at such a level that I said the next morning to my co-author, if I experience that again, I'm finished. I don't want anything to do with this again. It literally frightened the socks off me. I didn't understand at the time what was going on. To me, I was just reacting to the situation. But it created such a disturbance in my paradigm that it changed me onto a different set of treks. And that's whenever I was able to see the connections between the mounds, the sun, the serpent, the soul, and the fruit in particular that was being handed over by these geniuses, which are the genie, which are the jinn. That in itself was remarkable. Now, within one of the passage chambers here in Ireland, in Sligo, in fact, I wanted to film the sun enter the chamber. Ireland's a very strange place, as you know, but whenever it comes to the summer solstice, people gather from all over the world on top of these mountains around the west coast. And it'll end up that everybody wants to get into the chamber, but the chamber's not that big. It's maybe 7-8 feet in diameter. But when you've got 20 or 30 people wanting to climb into it to experience the sun entering through the sunbox, fights develop and everything else, and all hell breaks loose around the particular chamber. But the solstice is a 7-day event. We just don't have to focus on the 21st. We've got 7 days that we can go up onto that mountain and experience it. And that's what I did. And I went up onto the mountain when no one was there. And what I wanted to do was to video record the sun entering the chamber. But as fate would have it, I actually put in an audio recorder as well. And I headed up the mountain and let it do its thing. And I came back down after about an hour and reviewed the video footage. Perfect. It was exactly what I wanted, and came back to start editing back at the house. And I started listening to the audio, and this is where it got really, really interesting, because when the audio was playing, I could hear the huge pillar stones grinding in position within the chamber. Now I'm looking at the video and I'm saying, but those pillar chambers are not, the columns are not moving. And it was shortly after that this drum beat started, and it was a boom, boom. And then there was a higher pitch after that, boom, 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 boom. This was not coming from outside the chamber on the mountain. There was no one else on the mountain. This was coming from inside the chamber. It was years later that I discovered that the Babylonians used to use drums, kettle drums, within these particular areas, and the beating mimicked the god that they were calling. And within this passage chamber, this drum beat was boom, 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 boom. But what was interesting was the high beat. I couldn't understand the high beat until it dawned on me the high beat was a echo. Suddenly, the passage chamber had gone from 12 feet in its longest perspective to 300 feet. The echo had gone to 300 feet. The return echo was bum, 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 bum. And each time I kept getting that back, and it was 0.3 of a second was the time frame. And I understood then that if it's coming through air, we're looking at 300 feet. These particular places, these passage chambers, and that in itself, we should be asking, passage chamber, passageway to where exactly?
Yeah, sure.
And these chambers were activated, and there were key factors in which they were activated, and one of them was vibration, acoustical vibration. The oldest carving that we have in Ireland is down in County Offaly, showing a Celtic cross. They call it a Celtic cross, but the Celtic cross in itself is a bird's eye view of inside a passage chamber. You've got the circle, you've got the cruciform inside. On the 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock perspective of the cross, you have a person inside with their mouth open. They're producing the vibration. At the head at 12 o'clock, you have the shaman. And you have the person coming in for the information via the main shaft, the entranceway into these passage chambers. Now, what was interesting is that in the center, this swirl opened out, and what was produced from it and was consuming not only the shaman, but also the person coming in, were two serpents. This was not a depiction of a Celtic cross. It was a depiction of a Neolithic chamber that was something that was handed down by the Celts and kept in. You see, you have to understand that the Celtic Christianity was hiring the Druids and everyone else that was coming in to work there. Celtic Christianity was very, very different to what Christianity is today. Celtic Christianity wasn't abolished until I think it was the 11th century or somewhere like that. And we had quite a steering mechanism going on in Ireland that was affecting Rome. And we kept a lot of our history. If we didn't do that, a lot of our history from the Celtic perspectives would be lost. Because we had problems. Number one, the Druids didn't like writing things down. But for the guys, a lot of the stuff that did exist and still gives us clues of what was happening in Celtic Ireland comes from those converts to the new religion, which in itself came to Ireland with virtually nothing.
I think when Saint Augustine came, he encountered Saint Augustine came over, and there was an antidote where he met one of the Celtic Christians, and Saint Augustine came across in a negative light to the Celtic Christians, and there was some kind of like disturbance over that. There was some kind of disagreement. I'm not sure the whole. Did you ever hear of anything of that story?
I didn't. But when we look at Celtic Christianity and we look at the old pagan religion before, we do see the aspects of the serpent worship and the sun worship there. It is clearly there. Over in Mayo, we have Croagh-Patrick, and that in itself was a sacred spot for the serpent worship as well. And serpent worship, the serpents were also connected with natural gold reserves or natural wealth within the earth. And so you also got that strange connection going on there as well. But when St. Patrick, we've got the old story of St. Patrick coming to Ireland to rid it of its serpents, and he marched them off the Mayo coast there into the Atlantic. That's not actually where it happened. The event itself happened in County Tyrone, and this aspect of the serpent worship was forced back into the rock. Now here we have the rock again. A lot of the phenomena which I've been chasing appears on stone plateaus. It appears on near cliff faces. It appears in caves. A lot of this stuff is connected with the rocks. Again, the same goes across the spectrum for a lot of the phenomena. It appears around rocks. In fact, David Paulides in the United States, he wrote the Missing 411 Chronicles. And
where people go missing,
yeah, and he even went on record and said the majority of people that go missing in boulder fields. And so again, we're back to the rocks. What was going on with those rocks, and why do we have a connection with this phenomenon and the rocks in a multifaceted way? And one other key point I should also put in there in regards to connections that all the phenomena connects to. All of it can be summoned. Esoterically, it can all be summoned.
In what way?
In ways of for instance, say we go back 300 years, and we've got the guys there that are standing, forming their circle, and they're conjuring forward these particular angels or demons or whatever the case may be. That particular aspect that they were using, that mindset, can draw the phenomena forward, whether it be UFO, whether it be fairy, earth spirit, all of it can be conjured. And I've seen that personally. I've seen that time and time again.
It's like that doctor guy who's into the, Gear, what's his name?
Stephen Greer.
Yeah, he does something similar, right?
Yes, and I have serious aspects or concerns about that, about possibly not seeing the patterns from our past, and about what we're actually calling in. But anyhow, that's neither here or there.
So can you, sticking with the UFO phenomenon, can you tell me an encounter that maybe was more, in your eyes, or in your opinion, was more spiritual than physical?
There was always a physical aspect to it. I had it was an astrophysicist at the house, and he had his experiences with UFOs and everything else, and I was interviewing him about to see what he was finding in his research avenue. And as we started to sit down and have the discussion, at the time I was living in a 200-year-old farmhouse made of stone. So there we go again. And all of a sudden, just before he started, the walls started being beaten heavily from the outside. Now, the huge dog that we had was going absolutely berserk inside the house. And I thought, what's going on here? Because he was just about to tell me the information that I needed. And suddenly, bang, 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 bang. There was this interruption. And that interruption led to me not getting the information that particular night. But that night, both myself and my wife had one of the worst night sleeps that we've had. Disturbed, very disturbed. And it was around 4 a.m. I got up and let the dog out to go to the bathroom. And I was standing at the back door, and it was a beautiful night. And suddenly, all of a sudden, in the night sky, just this boom. It was like a huge welder's flash went off. And I realized at that particular point, okay, they've got my attention. But I said, and I never verbalized this, I thought it. I was very aware of this conscious connection that goes on with it. I said, two's a charm. Boom. All right. Okay. But three will really do it. Boom. I got the three. Now, I have a thing that I tend to talk about all the time. It's called the 20-second rule. Is to listen to your seat of discernment within the first 20 seconds. Understand the signals that are coming through the body, because that is where the truth of the phenomenon lies.
How do you mean? Like when you sit with yourself, listen to your own intuition? Is that what you mean?
No, during an encounter,
Mm-hmm.
the first 20 seconds is exceptionally important, because it doesn't matter in what it appears as. When your instinct reacts to that, when your gift of discernment reacts to that in a particular way, then you know you're not what you're telling me or showing me or what you are. So it really is, it's your understanding of the phenomena as it appears at that moment.